and welcome back to the PNY Pro Podcast. My name is Jerome, and today I'm here with Derek Ellis.
Hello, hello.
And today we have some special guests. We have Matt and Kelly from the Puget team. Can you guys actually just introduce yourself?
I'm Kelly Shipman. I'm one of the lab techs here at Puget Systems. I specialize in 3D workflows from 3D content creation, rendering, and game engines for game development and virtual production.
Hi, so good morning, guys. So I'm also in our labs department, and my focus is more on media and entertainment. And just a little bit of background on the whole labs team. It's basically, so Puget Systems, we do workstations and servers for a wide number of verticals, and the labs team is basically our foot in reality of what are people doing in the real world, what hardware is out there, and making sure they line up so that, we're actually doing the right systems for different workflows.
Well, Matt and Kelly, I'm excited to have you guys on this episode. We have a great partnership. We got to do a lot of activities together. We did the virtual event with View talking about virtual production, highlighted, RTX solutions and in that space. Then also we got to check out your booth at SIGGRAPH, which was phenomenal. I got to speak with Eric. We did an interview with you guys. So really looking forward to this episode and diving a little bit more. So I guess to kind of kick things off, tell us a little bit about Puget Systems, like who you are and, what do you have to offer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so Puget, we've been around for just over 20 years now. But for a long time, we were very much, in parents' basement kind of a company. It started very small, doing general computing stuff. We pivoted probably 12 years or so ago away from like general computing and gaming over to the more professional side. Because we just saw there was a void there. There were the big guys, but there wasn't really too many smaller people and people who wanted to be very transparent. And that's a big thing for us is transparency. So, we have all of our workstation sales, our consulting support, production department. I mean, they're all absolutely terrific. That's why people keep coming back. But we also have our labs team where we do a lot of research and a lot of publishing of the results of that research. So new video cards come out, new CPUs come out, new workflows come out, like virtual production is a big one. AI is a big one for us recently. And then just like, what does it take to do those? Because maybe some of those big guys know, but they hold on to that knowledge very closely, whereas we try to share it with everyone, whether you're a customer or not, because it's just valuable information for everyone.
Right. Can you dive into a little bit more of like the product offerings? And I know, as you said, you kind of transitioned a little bit more into the professional side of things. Can you talk about what are the different NVIDIA offerings you guys are working with?
We are predominantly an NVIDIA house right now. We have a few AMD products, but we're predominantly NVIDIA just because of the spaces we target. NVIDIA is just so strong. But we run the gamut, everything from freelancers, single person studios, or not even a studio there, but everywhere from freelancers up to mid-sized studios up to large, B2B sales, 100 unit, orders. So we really run the gamut. And when you do that wide, your product line also can get very wide. So, I mean, we offer GeForce cards when they make sense. We offer the Pro cards when, reliability, uptime, compatibility, and everything else is really required. On the CPU side, we pretty much end up carrying every product line out there. I mean, Intel Core, AMD Ryzen, AMD Threadripper, Intel Xeon, just because when you're targeting, again, such a wide variety of workflows and like users, you kind of have to have, the wide variety of stuff, because we don't want to have ever where it's just a single configuration. We say, what's your budget? Oh, it's 5K. Okay, here's the one configuration that costs 5K. Now we get down to what are you doing? What's all the applications you work with? What, works your workflows? And then really try to tailor it all the way down to be the exact right thing. So for us, again, like I said, sometimes it's GeForce, oftentimes it's the Pro cards. The 6000 ADAs have been terrific for us recently. And it's just keeping up with all that and making sure that the end user, when they're putting that money down, it'll actually be, beneficial to them. Because man, ROI on some of these workflows is insane. Like they'll spend, if it's a 10% performance uplift, they don't care what the budget is sometimes if it's going to pay for itself in a few months.
I like that because it sounds like it's specialized in a sense. It's not just kind of like a pre-configured select one, add to cart, and it's shipped to you. You're taking the time to say, okay, what's your workflow like? What if you're doing like modeling, 3D modeling, or anything like that, then GPU memory, different stuff like that all comes into consideration when building the system. So I do like that. It's not like I'm sure you even, like you mentioned, you do have some systems, but like you can specialize it based off the user's needs, which I think is huge.
Yeah, it's not really one size fits all on that side of note.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's really tough. I mean, we do have what we call our recommended systems, or our recommended systems, which is basically, hey, you're doing Premiere Pro. Here's a couple of like presets, and like you can't really go wrong because we won't have like a video card that doesn't make any sense for Premiere Pro, or we won't have a CPU that doesn't make any sense where you'd spend more money and you'd get worse performance. But even then, I don't believe you can even purchase directly off our website. I think the only thing you can do is like save a quote, and then someone will contact you either via email or phone or whatever and talk, because it's very rare that someone ends up configuring a system on our website and then buys exactly what they configured. Almost always it gets tweaked. And it's not because, someone is, completely unknowledgeable of what technology is out there. I mean, we have a lot of customers like that. I mean, they focus on their work. They don't really care about the technology. They just want it to get done. But even the people that do follow tech, man, there's so much misinformation on the internet. And a lot of it's not, it's not someone trying to be wrong. It's just they're saying something that was true, 5 years ago, or sometimes even 1 year ago, sometimes even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And technology or the software has changed so much that that's no longer valid. So really the role of our consultants is, okay, this is what you thought you needed. Let's talk then about what you're actually doing and then tweak that to be exactly what it is you need for your actual workflow.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's really interesting. So actually, how long does that time frame take in order for someone to be like, okay, I thought I wanted this, and now you're giving me this entire configuration that a little bit works a little bit more towards my needs. But how does that process actually work, and how's that fleshed out?
It really depends. Sometimes it's a fairly straightforward workflow. It's someone in like a video editor. They work with common codecs. It usually could take on a couple of emails, a single phone call, and cool, they're good to go. Sometimes there's other workflows, like AI is a big one for us recently, where that is changing weekly. And so what's going on? What are they going to need? That too, like they're often writing their own code, so there's no like, hey, yeah, for this one application, it's like, well, what are you doing? That can take quite a bit more back and forth. Some of the industries that Kelly works in right now are in very big flux. A lot of rendering stuff is changing. A lot of the real-time engines, like Unreal Engine and how that's being used in virtual production is changing all the time. And that you're not even just talking like, hey, what code are you working with or anything like that. It's like, well, how big is your LED volume? How many things you want to have? So actually, Kelly, I'll hand it off to you a little bit. So in your workflows, like, I know you're a part of a lot of those conversations. How deep do you guys end up having to go on those, especially in virtual production?
The virtual production side, we go pretty deep because virtual production is just such a wide umbrella term for a whole bunch of different things. And you're going to have to go into, like, are you doing any chroma keying? Are you shooting on a LED wall? Do you need 5 nodes or 1 node to run that LED wall? Do you need director node that is not connected to the LED wall? Do you need SMPTE cards or quadro-sync cards or capture cards? Or like, there's a whole list of different ways you can do this thing depending on how that studio wants to do, how they want to work. So we really get down into the real minute details of every single add-in card, every single drive they have. Do they need external storage? Do they need additional networking? We get pretty deep into those conversations with them. And those are ones we definitely don't want people just clicking buy off the shelf, because it might not fit your needs. It likely won't. You'll need to do a bunch of other add-in cards.
I guess the question for you, maybe for those who are listening and might not know, when you mentioned like node, like what exactly is that? Is that like the workstation, or what is exactly is a node?
In the virtual production world, when we talk about nodes, it is the computer that is actually running the 3D scene that is being displayed on either the LED wall or being comped in over a green screen. So in an LED wall, you have to often have walls that are 30 million pixels or greater. And to do that on a single system is extremely taxing to be able to get high fidelity if you want photorealistic backgrounds and stuff like that running in real time. So it often gets broken out into multiple servers that are connected together with Quadro sync cards to be able to synchronize all of them together with the camera, with the LED wall. So that way each node only has to do a portion of the wall, and you don't have to run 30 million pixels on one node. You can do 5 million and use 4 nodes to then, or whatever the math would be.
Okay.
It's basically like multi-monitor, right? Like I have 3 monitors on my desk. You're basically doing that, except they need it all to be completely synced up, because like if you have 2 monitors on your desk, like you don't really care if like a video is slightly off on something. I mean, gaming, they do deal with this sometimes, people who do like surround video or surround stuff. And I know NVIDIA even has some software for that, but this, you're not just doing it on a single system, you're doing it on multiple systems. And so they all have to have like a clock basically, so they can tell each other like render this frame at exactly the same time on every system, because otherwise you get screen tearing and things get weird. I know sometimes you have to like sync it up with the camera so that like the refresh rates you don't get like flickering and weird stuff. So yeah, like Kelly was saying, it gets very complicated when you're dividing up a screen into 4 or 8 or however many nodes, because the more nodes you have, the more like fidelity and the more quality you can push. So like if you just want a background that's just like solid color, whatever, you can push almost any resolution from a single node. You want photorealistic stuff being done in real time in Unreal Engine, you got to divide that up.
Multiple nodes to run these massive LED walls, and that definitely makes sense. So when it comes to, I guess, solutions from a Puget System configuration, you do have Ampere, which is huge. I know within you have the Ampere architecture, those you can utilize NVLink, but then also now, like we mentioned, we got to visit your booth at SIGGRAPH. We now have like this full stack solution within the ADA generation. So I mean, since that launch, I know it's still fairly new. Originally it was super high end, the 6000 ADA, then we had the 4000 SFF, which that probably wouldn't be the best use case because it's form factor and everything. But now we do have, a 4000, 4500, and 5000. So how do you see maybe these new GPUs, playing a part within, I know even if it is like media entertainment, another big thing is AI training, inferencing, like all these different things that utilize, the different boards that come with different memory. Like how I guess that's a good question. Like how important is like memory usage within like this type of, use case? A
lot of the media and entertainment world, so that's typically video editing, post-production, graphic design, motion graphics. Often where we actually start in a lot of those workflows is how much VRAM do they need? And then, that gives you like, okay, here's your minimum card. And then it's just a question of, will that card give them the performance that they need to keep up with whatever workflow they're doing? So if it's a video editor and they want to work with 8K Red, okay, we already know that they're going to need probably, 24 gigs of VRAM. Cool, that limits us now to, like the 5000 ADA or the 6000 ADA. And then at that point, it's, okay, well, then how much performance do you need? Something like that. They probably don't need a 6000 ADA, so they'd go with like a 5000 ADA, because that way they can spend more of their budget on storage or RAM or something else. Other times, it's give us the maximum performance you possibly can. And that's usually things where it's not really being done in real time. Like video editing, you hit play, that's real time. But it's things like noise reduction or, these kind of like effects that are kind of applied afterwards, stabilization, all that kind of jazz, upscaling. And that kind of thing, often it is, what's the most performance you can possibly give me in my budget? Because, it could mean the difference between we're going to run it overnight or we're going to run it overnight and then also the next day. So that ends up taking 2 days worth of time. So in those cases, it really is just like, how much performance can you give me? And then sometimes, in the case of like DaVinci Resolve, it's also how many cards can you give me at the same time? Because one of the things we've been dealing with recently is performance has been pushed so far that power has also crept up. So some of the things we used to do, like quad GPU systems, it's a little bit tougher now because of just power requirements. I mean, performance is so much higher per even watt. So, I mean, that's the good thing there is like performance per watt is still like significantly better. But for those people that really want like, give me the most regardless of money, we get into some cases where it's like, okay, now we don't have to just even talk about the computer. let's talk about like the circuits, the electrical circuits in your office to make sure like you've got 20 amp circuits, or that like computer's the only thing that's going to be on that. Or question sometimes now is, can we move this from a workstation and put it into your like server room, so that power and cooling is can be better handled, and then you can like offload things onto that server in your server room, so that it's not just a quad 6000 ADA system sitting under your desk. I mean, because that's 1600 watts of power. You also have to think of that as, hey, that's the same as a 1600 watt space heater going on in your office. Like that's a lot of heat, a lot of performance, but a lot of heat. So it's a lot more considerations you have to get into in those like super crazy high end workflows.
And even on those same workflows, I actually kind of wanted to dive in a little bit when it comes to like AI and machine learning and even real time rendering, because I know there's a lot of cross when it comes to that. I know, actually, Kelly, can you actually touch a little bit on when it comes to real time rendering and how that kind of ties back into the different GPUs that are available for these solutions?
Sure. So in real-time rendering, there's a number of different factors going on. There's actually the computation of the scene, the 3D geometry, the textures, all that kind of stuff, and the raw horsepower needed to make those computations over time. And when we're talking about real time, we're talking a minimum of 30 FPS or 24 if you're doing syncing it with an LED wall, and that's the frame rate you're going to be filming at. But so you're talking 24 frames a second. So you have a 30th of a second to be able to render an entire image, refresh it again and again and again. So you need a lot of just raw power to be able to make these computations. But then that goes hand in hand with the more triangles that are on the screen, the more textures you have, the more pixels trying to run on that system. All that stuff incrementally increases how much VRAM is needed. And so you're trying to get really high fidelity, really high resolution. It increases your VRAM considerably, to the point where 24 gigs of VRAM is kind of viewed by a lot of virtual production people as bare minimum, that 48 is preferred. Some would even prefer higher than that, but that's where we are right now, is 48 is the top. So yeah, that's the main thing, is like the more stuff you're trying to do, the more fidelity you want, the higher the frame rates you want, the more VRAM you're going to need.
That's good.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but also like multi-GPU has been changing quite a bit in virtual production, right? Because NVLink is no longer available on ADAs, correct?
Correct. So there was a time when multi-GPU was used in Unreal Engine for virtual production by having one GPU dedicated to the inner frustum, so what is on camera, and one GPU dedicated to the outer frustum, what's outside of the camera but still on the wall. Without NVLink, that doesn't really work, but Unreal introduced a way to run multi-process rendering. So you have two instances of Unreal Engine running at the same time, one dedicated to the inner, one dedicated to the outer. They don't have to be NVLink that way. But now you're running two instances of Unreal Engine, which is a hefty program. So that means you need more system memory, more cores, all that kind of stuff. So it is still kind of available. It's tricky to make it work. Then you have to get that to work with N-Display and Mosaic, and that can kind of get finicky as well. But yeah, it is possible to do multi-GPU. It's not like it used to be, and it's not the multi-GPU that people think of, where the two work together to render one frame. In either case, it's each GPU is rendering a different image.
But within the ADA generation cards, I think it has nearly almost double the L2 cache, which then kind of help offset that as well. I mean, which is great. And then also too, like the FP32 compute is nearly, in some cases, based on the card or whatever, is almost double than what you might get on some of the previous Ampere generations. So even though you can't do that, I think that's definitely a good way for them to kind of push the boundary, push performance, because I know, like you said, in certain cases, yes, the NVLink and multi-GPU was popular, but now I think we're getting to that point where hopefully, a single GPU is gonna be able to do like almost that same performance, if not more. So
yeah. And even
I think part of it is just in these emerging workflows that didn't exist a couple of years ago, at least not to the extent that they are today, whether that's virtual production, AI, just things are changing so fast that you really have to try to keep up on. I mean, that's our role really, is to keep up on it, so that our customers, like, we can tell them when, like, no, hey, things have changed on either the hardware side or on the workflow side, because sometimes it's chicken and egg. NVIDIA was looking at NVLink, and they're looking ahead possibly to like new ways of doing sync, or hey, maybe we don't need it anymore because we've increased performance so much. But then sometimes it takes the people who are actually like doing the work, actually like doing the virtual production, doing the AI research. They're used to one way, and then they'll just have to like make that transition of like, oh, things have changed on the hardware side. I need to change how we're thinking about it, doing, how we're doing our own work. And usually it ends up being a net positive. Almost always it's a net positive. But it's just taking that time. And I know sometimes for the end users, that can be a little bit frustrating, because it's like, hey, this has been working for me for 3 years, and now I have to change how I'm doing it. That whole resistance to change is always very tough. But again, part of our role is to show why things have changed. And so when we can say like, yeah, things have changed, but look, the hardware is 50% faster, and if you use it in this new way, in this new workflow, that adds another 50%. So like, hey, you're not just getting a 50% performance bump, you're getting a 2x performance bump. That usually helps people change their tune of, oh, I'm no longer frustrated, now I'm excited. Which is a good thing. It's a good thing to be excited about new hardware, new workflows, new industries.
Pro cards can still do SLI over PCIe instead of having the physical NVLink connector on it. Unfortunately, PCIe 4 that the cards currently on are just a little too slow for virtual production type work to be able to make that work the way they used to. So now you do this multi-frame rendering instead. So then when PCIe 5 comes around on GPUs, then this might all change again. And so luckily the virtual production world is one used to adapting to new workflows constantly, because this is all being adapted from stuff that was not designed for virtual production. So everyone in the space is used to like, all right, things have changed. Hey, we found this new thing we can do. Let's incorporate this. And then, oh, things changed again. I can do this other thing instead. It's just a constant constant experimentation of, let's try something new. Let's try something new. Let's find a new workflow. How can we utilize all the power that we can from all this hardware that we have?
A question I do have then, because we're on the subject of multi and single GPUs. I think it was like an article I read, and there was something that they're saying like a majority of configurations, and you being a system builder and offer these solutions. I mean, have you seen, I guess within your systems, do you see majority people utilizing a single GPU? Or do you still, I guess mainly on Ampere, again, with that NVLink and all that, were you seeing a lot more systems that were utilizing multi-GPU configurations?
These days, I don't have any stats or numbers in front of me, but I would say probably something like anywhere from 75 to 90% of our systems are single GPU. It might even be higher. Just a lot of but you also have to keep in mind the workflows we target are very wide. Yeah, I mean, something like Photoshop, whatever, you put a low mid-range GPU and most people are going to be totally fine. So for those things, yeah, absolutely, there's no reason to do multi. But with the power we're getting out of like the Ada generation now, and like these newer GPUs, there's not quite as much need for it. In some ways, I kind of think of it as, hey, that person who would have gotten dual GPUs 4 years ago, now they're just going to get a single GPU because it can do everything they need, and cool. So it's really like the people that were getting 3 or 4 GPUs, a number of years ago, are the ones who are getting 2 GPUs. And then, the people that are getting more than 2 are like, those are just the people that had no actual budget. It's all about just like, give me the most I can, it'll pay for itself. So it's not a ton of systems we still do multi-GPU for. I would say it's basically AI is a big one, especially people that are trying to work with like large language models, because we're getting a lot of interest in that. We actually just launched a server specifically for LLMs for people who want to do it on site they don't want to use ChatGPT because you put stuff into the cloud, you have no idea kind of what goes on with it.
Yeah.
And they want to be able to train their own models. I mean, we're even looking at that ourselves. Like, hey, let's put all of our support articles into this LLM, and then maybe it can help us, diagnose trends and find, and just like help get people to resolution faster. So that's a big one. AI is still for multi-GPU. Straight up rendering, the classic renderings with, V-Ray, Octane Render, Redshift, I'm actually not sure, but definitely like V-Ray and Octane Render, that kind of classic stuff that goes into a server. Yeah, they're going to want multi-GPUs just because scaling is nearly perfect. There's some stuff in media and entertainment, like DaVinci Resolve workflows, some like AI scaling stuff right now has been popular, taking old black and white films and either colorizing it or upscaling it to 4K. That kind of stuff. Yeah, lots of multi-GPUs. But those are really, I would say, kind of the main ones. A lot of other people, again, we're getting to the point where if you can do it on a single GPU, it's so much simpler. There's so many less things that can break. There's so many less things that can go wrong. Every time you're adding complexity, even if it should be fine, when you're dealing with everything from the BIOS level to Windows or Linux to whatever applications you're working with and the drivers and the firmwares, it increases the complexity. So we try to keep stuff as simple as we can whenever possible, just because, reliability, I would say, is the number one thing in a workstation for professional use, more than performance. Because, a single blue screen at the wrong time and you can wipe out an entire day's work. If the system goes down and you have to send it in for repair, that's terrible. That's not worth, a few percent. So we always try to keep it as simple as possible.
Well, yes, Matt, that's a lot of great information. And I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you, Matt and Kelly, again, for joining us. We are glad to have Puget Systems on the episode. And who knows, if anything comes up new in the future, we'd love to have you guys back on for another episode. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, so Jerome, tell everybody where can they find us?
Yeah, so you can find us at PNY Pro on all social media accounts. Or you can also find us at Apple Music, Spotify, or all your other favorite podcasting platforms.